One of the most difficult things to deal with as a new mom is the consequences of a bad vaginal laceration at the time of delivery. So in today's video, we're going to be discussing the most severe form of vaginal laceration, which is a 4th-degree laceration, and what can happen if it's not repaired correctly. Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Nabila Noor, board certified and fellowship trained urogynecologist and a pelvic reconstructive surgeon. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new, hope you like what you see, and if so, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and also share it with a friend. So let me share a patient story with you. So this is a young woman who was pregnant for the first time. At the time of her vaginal delivery, she had a long labor and ended up delivering a large baby vaginally, and as a consequence it had a 4th-degree laceration. 4th-degree laceration is a tear that goes from the vaginal opening all the way into the rectum, so that everything is disrupted, from the vaginal tissue to the muscle to the anal sphincter as well as the rectal mucosa. Now, her laceration was repaired at the time of her delivery. Unfortunately, it didn't heal well, and she ended up with a false connection between the rectum and the vagina. We call this a rectovaginal fistula, which is basically a false tract between the rectum and the vagina. Now, what ended up as a result of this fistula was that every time she would have a bowel movement, stool would be coming out not just through her anal opening, but also through the vagina because there's a false tract. You don't have to be a physician or anybody in healthcare field to understand how debilitating, embarrassing, and awful that is. This is a young mom. She's already so stressed out. She's already emotional. There's so much happening around her. She's adjusting to her life as a new mom. She's having sleepless nights because her baby is crying. She is going through a lot of hormonal changes, a lot of physical and emotional and mental changes. And on top of that, now she has to deal with this awful situation where instead of her repair healing, it actually broke up, and now she has this false tract because of which she's having stool coming out through the vagina. Take a pause and think about it. She's also embarrassed to be near anybody because she feels like she's smelling of stool all the time. She's embarrassed to even consider intimacy with her partner, even though her partner is very supportive, and she's plain out miserable. That's when she was referred to my office to treat her rectovaginal fistula. Let me pause for a little bit here and review the anatomy with you a little bit so you can understand what exactly the 4th-degree laceration entails. So this is the external female genitalia, and we'll review it together. So this yellow dot right here is the clitoris. Underneath that, you have that black dot, which is the urethral opening. So the urethra is where urine comes out when we have to empty our bladder. Underneath that is the vaginal opening. So at the time of vaginal delivery, this is where the baby comes out of. Now you can see the vaginal opening is not very wide, but of course, to accommodate a baby being able to be delivered, the vaginal opening has to stretch to about 10 centimeters or so, because that's how wide the baby's head is. And that's where laceration can happen, because normally a vaginal opening for most women is about 3 to 4 centimeters. Now, as it stretches, depending on how elastic the tissue is and how quickly that vaginal tissue had to stretch, you can end up with different grades of vaginal laceration, because that sudden stretching of those vaginal muscles can cause some damage to the muscular structure in the pelvic area. Now, when we talk about vaginal lacerations, there's 4 kinds of lacerations that can happen. The 1st-degree laceration is something very superficial. It stays limited to the vaginal epithelium. A 2nd-degree laceration is when you have a laceration that extends through the vaginal opening and also disrupts the muscles underneath. A 3rd-degree laceration goes from the vaginal opening and extends all the way up to the anal sphincter muscles. So the anal sphincter muscles are surrounding the anal opening. So the anal opening is where stool comes out during a bowel movement. And of course, a 4th-degree laceration, like the patient that I described, is where you have a tear that goes all the way from the vaginal opening through the muscles, through the sphincter muscles, and basically all the way up to the rectal opening. So pretty much everything from here to here is completely disrupted. So when we repair a 4th-degree laceration, it's very important to make sure that all those layers that got disrupted is repaired appropriately. You can't just take stitches and put them together, because then that area doesn't heal appropriately. The muscles, the sphincters don't work appropriately after, and women can have a lot of consequences as a result. When we're repairing a 4th-degree laceration, it's very important that we take the time and repair each layer that was disrupted separately. So what are those layers? The first layer is to bring the rectal mucosa together. So the rectum is where stool collects, and then we have stool coming out through the anal opening. So that area has to be closed first. Then we have to bring together the sphincter muscle. So these are the anal sphincter muscles that helps us control our stool and bowel movement. If those sphincter muscles are not brought together properly, then women afterwards can have problem controlling their stool. That's what we call fecal incontinence. Next, we have to bring the vaginal muscles together because that's what builds the perineal body. A lot of the times I will see women who maybe had a remote vaginal delivery with a bad laceration that was not repaired well, and now when I'm looking at their external genitalia, they have a vaginal opening and then there's the anal opening, and in between there's no space. That's because those perineal muscles were never brought together correctly. And then, of course, you have to close the vaginal opening and make it look the way it should. So if all these layers are not brought together correctly, then women can develop bowel issues such as fecal incontinence, where they're not able to control stool. They can have rectovaginal fistula, like our patient that we described. They can have pain with intercourse because there can be scar tissue that's formed, and things haven't healed quite well. And of course, physically there can be asymmetry if we don't bring each of the layers correctly. So this is not something to be taken lightly. Repairing a 4-degree laceration can be very complicated. You have to take the time. You have to make sure that the surgeon who's doing it has done this and understands the different layers, because if that's not done correctly, that's when women can end up with issues that can be really debilitating for a new mom. Now, as a urogynecologist, one of the things I would recommend is, if you're somebody who've had a prior 4-degree laceration, or worse, ended up with a rectovaginal fistula, and you're considering a second pregnancy, then have a discussion with your OBGYN to see if an elective cesarean section could be an option for you. Because what happens is, once you've had a significant amount of tear in that vaginal area, your muscles and your sphincter muscles are already weak. So with another vaginal delivery, you have a higher chance of disrupting those muscles and ending up with a similar tear. Of course, it's a very nuanced and very individualized discussion to have with your OBGYN based on your future plan for more children and weighing the risks and benefits, but it's worth a conversation to have. Hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe and share it with a friend. I'll be back next week with some more videos talking about your pelvic health and how to take care of it. See you soon. Bye.